February morning pressed down on the city like a weight. The snow was relentless, falling in thick sheets that made the streets blur into endless whiteness. Streetlights glowed dimly against the gray sky, their halos fading into the storm. The world felt muted, as though the snow had swallowed every sound. Samira pushed against the wind as she stepped out of her small apartment building. Her coat was too thin for this weather, the wool scarf tucked under her hijab already damp with icy flakes. She clutched her worn leather bag against her chest, trying to protect the few papers inside from the storm. Her hands were raw and red, her cheeks stung with every gust, and her shoes slipped against the frozen pavement. But none of that felt heavier than what weighed inside her chest. She had an interview. Not just any interview. An internship at a publishing house she had been chasing for months. If she failed this one, there might not be another chance. Rent was due. Her phone bill was overdue, and the little savings she had were dwindling like sand slipping through fingers. Every rejection she had faced so far echoed in her mind like a cruel chorus. "We regret to inform you, we're going with another candidate. Your profile does not match our current needs." She gritted her teeth against the wind. Today has to be different. But beneath that resolve, another voice whispered. A quieter, more painful voice, one that reminded her of prayers left behind, of faith abandoned. It had been 4 years since she last prayed. 4 years since she bowed her head in sujud. 4 years since she whispered dua with a heart still open. She remembered Fajr mornings as a child, the soft call of her father waking her, the faint smell of cardamom tea in the kitchen, the gentle warmth of her mother's shawl as she draped it around Samira's shoulders before prayer. She remembered kneeling on the green prayer mat with tiny floral patterns, reciting verses in a trembling, young voice. But that life had dissolved. Divorce cracked her family in half. Arguments left scars deeper than bruises. Loneliness spread like a fog. She had told herself she was too busy, too tired, too broken. One missed prayer became 2, then a week, then months, until she could no longer remember the last time she bowed before Allah. And now, as she trudged through the snow toward downtown, the guilt clung tighter than the cold. Her arm lifted weakly as a yellow cab crawled toward the curb, its tires grinding through slush. The driver slowed and leaned toward the window. Samira rushed forward, slipped slightly, then gripped the door handle. She climbed in, the warmth of the heater enveloping her instantly. The first thing she noticed was the smell, a gentle blend of oud wood mixed with something sweeter, cinnamon maybe. It was comforting, reminding her faintly of her grandmother's house when she was little. The driver was elderly. His beard was thick and white, his olive skin framed by a wool cap pulled low. His eyes caught hers briefly in the mirror. Kind, steady, patient. "Where to, sister?" he asked, his voice low but warm. She gave him the address of the publishing office. He nodded. "Insha'Allah, we'll get there." Something about the way he said it, not casual, not forced, made her chest tighten. She hadn't heard Insha'Allah spoken with such ease in years. The cab merged back into the storm, its wipers dragging snow aside with rhythmic sweeps. Samira leaned her forehead against the cold glass, watching the blur of gray buildings pass. Her reflection stared back at her. Tired eyes, lips pressed thin, face pale against the dark fabric of her hijab. She hardly recognized herself. Inside, the cab was like another world. The heater hummed gently. A small string of prayer beads dangled from the rearview mirror, swaying with every bump. On the dashboard, a tiny Quran rested neatly, its gold-embossed cover catching the faint light. Samira closed her eyes, letting the warmth lull her for a moment. But her mind refused to stay still. If I get this internship, maybe things will finally turn around. Maybe I'll finally prove I'm not a failure. Maybe I'll... Her thoughts trailed off. Because deep inside, another whisper rose. What if it's not the job you need? What if what's missing is something else? She shook her head, pushing it away. The driver hummed softly, an old tune, maybe a nasheed. It was soothing. For the first time that day, Samira felt her shoulders ease slightly. They were halfway downtown when the cab slowed. Samira sat up, alarm flickering in her chest. The driver turned carefully into a small parking lot where a modest brick masjid stood, its windows glowing warmly against the snow. Please don't worry, he said, sensing her unease. Just Jummah. 15 minutes. You won't be late, I promise. Samira blinked. You're stopping? Yes. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. If I miss the khutbah, I miss the food for my soul, but your ride is still free. Her brows furrowed. You're not charging me? He smiled gently. Only Allah pays me. Before she could protest, he shut off the engine, pulled his coat tighter, and stepped out into the snow. His figure moved steadily toward the masjid doors until he disappeared inside. Samira sat frozen. Who does that? Who interrupts their job, especially in a storm, for prayer? And who leaves a stranger sitting in a cab, trusting the world not to take advantage? Her eyes drifted to the radio. A soft crackle, then voices. He had tuned it to the masjid's loudspeaker. The khutbah began. The imam's voice was measured, not shouting, not stern, just steady, like a hand resting gently on a trembling shoulder. Do not run from Allah, he said. Run to Him even when you are ashamed, especially then. Samira's chest constricted. No sin is greater than His mercy. No soul too dirty to be washed. Her hands tightened on her bag. Heat rose in her eyes. 4 years. 4 long years without a single prayer. Could mercy still reach her? Could forgiveness still cover her? The imam's words filled the cab like warmth from a fire. She swallowed hard, feeling something crack in the armor she had built around her heart. The door opened again. Snow swirled in briefly before the driver climbed back in, his face calm, almost glowing with a peace Samira couldn't name. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded quickly, blinking away moisture. After a silence, she whispered, Do you pray every day? He chuckled, a soft, fatherly sound. Not always on time, but I always return. That's the deal I made with Allah. No matter how far I go, I return. Samira stared at him in the mirror. His words landed with a weight that silenced her thoughts. I used to pray, she admitted, voice barely audible. His eyes softened. Then you're still ahead of many. Some never started. The words pierced her. Ahead, she thought she was hopelessly behind. Yet here he was, reframing her failure as a chance. The cab resumed its steady journey through the snow. Samira sat in silence, her heart louder than the engine. When they reached her building, she fumbled for her wallet. No, he said, raising a hand. It's on Allah. At least, your name? She asked, desperate to hold on to the thread he had given her. Just remember me in your next dua. And with that, he pulled away, disappearing into the snow. 2 weeks later, Samira got the internship, but the joy was strangely muted. Something deeper pulled at her heart. Fridays felt different now. They carried weight, like a quiet call pressing against her chest. She discovered a masjid near her office. Masjid al-Hidayah. One Friday, after nearly turning back 3 times, she pushed herself inside. The women's prayer area was simple, carpeted, warm, filled with soft murmurs of salam and dua. She stood awkwardly at the back, unsure, feeling like an intruder. But when the khutbah began, the same warmth wrapped around her heart. Some of you may feel lost, the imam said. Some may feel unworthy. Know this: Allah's mercy is greater than all mistakes. Even the darkest path is lit by a single step toward Him. Her tears came quietly. A single step. That was all it took. After prayer, she asked a sister about the cab driver. Uncle Karim? The woman said, her eyes softening. He passed last Friday. Heart attack, right outside the door. He died in wudu. Samira froze. The world seemed to still. He had prayed, for the last time, given his last ride, planted his last seed. Snow fell silently outside as Samira sat on the cold bench. She whispered through trembling lips, Ya Allah, I'm here now. Her phone buzzed. Asr in 8 minutes. She opened her prayer app, hesitated, then whispered her first real dua in years. Forgive me for being late, but don't close the door. Days turned to weeks. Samira began to pray again, not perfectly. Sometimes she missed, sometimes she rushed, but she returned. Each time she bowed her head, she felt the weight lift, little by little. She remembered Uncle Karim's words. No matter how far I go, I return. At work, she noticed kindness in places she had ignored. A colleague holding the elevator, a stranger smiling on the subway. The world hadn't changed, but she had. Fridays became sacred. She no longer stood at the back of the masjid with hesitation. She stood with quiet pride, grateful simply to belong again. Months passed. Samira's life moved forward. The internship became a job. Her prayers became consistent. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years, and every time she prayed, she remembered him. Uncle Karim, the cab driver who stopped for Jummah, the man who showed her that faith could be gentle, steady, and real. She never saw him again. But his light lived on, in her salah, in her du'as, in the small kindnesses she now carried into the world. Because some rides take you somewhere, and some rides take you home.